We often talk about habits as mattering because of the external results they can get us. We'll say things like habits will help you be more productive, or they'll help you make more money, or get in shape, or reduce stress. And it's true, habits can help you do all those things, and that's great. But the real reason that habits matter, the true reason that habits make a difference, is because every action you take is like a vote for the type of person you wish to become. We have stories that we tell ourselves that are helpful, but also have stories that we tell ourselves that are hurtful. Some of them are stories that you don't even think you're telling yourself. Like, for a long time, I didn't even realize that saying something like, I have a sweet tooth, like that's a story that you tell yourself about what you eat and what's normal for you and what type of thing you crave and desire. There's nothing wrong with eating sweets, but you just want to keep it in the right zone, like you don't want it to become this thing that overpowers your whole identity. I have a sweet tooth. I'm bad at directions. I'm terrible at math. I'm the type of person who never remembers people's names. These stories that we tell ourselves, whatever version of them that they are they helping you or hindering you? Are they serving the type of person that you wish to become, or are they holding you back from that? Identity is a two-way street. It can either support the habits that you're trying to build, or it can hinder them and prevent them. And so it's worth it to do this little kind of self-assessment and try to figure out, what stories am I telling myself? What is hard for me to overcome because of the narrative that I have in my head? I'm not a member of the military, but I've heard from a variety of my readers who are. And this interesting pattern has come up, which is many of them, they spend their career serving, and a large part of their identity is being a soldier. It's what they identify as. It's a huge part of their life story. And then, once they finish serving and they enter civilian life and they're done with that portion of their career, they sometimes have this conflict. I thought I was a soldier. That's what I identified as. That's who I view myself as, but I'm not that anymore. So what am I now? I think one of the key things here is when you lose an aspect of your identity like that, or it feels like you've lost that element of your identity, it can become useful to focus on the aspects of that identity that translate across context. So for example, maybe you can't be a soldier anymore, but you can still be a good teammate, but you can still be the type of person who finishes their mission. Once you find those elements of your identity that translate across context, you're in a better position to feel like you didn't lose yourself, to feel like you have habits that can continue to serve the core of who you are, but also address the new situation that you find yourself in. Sometimes I think about the process of behavior change kind of like the layers of an onion. So the outermost layer is your outcomes or your results. And this is the obvious thing when people think about changing their behavior. Oh, I want to, make more money, or I want to lose 40 pounds, or whatever it is. There's some kind of result that they're shooting for. The next layer of the onion, one layer in, is process. That's your system, your plan, your approach, the strategy that you have for achieving that result. So the first layer is, say, I want to lose 40 pounds. The next layer in, the plan is, okay, if I'm going to do that, I need to go to the gym 4 days a week, and I need to follow this kind of diet, and so on. I think there's a core of behavior change, a deeper layer that often gets overlooked, which is, who is the type of person that I am? What is my identity? Outcomes, process, identity. And often we start at the outside and work our way in, and our assumption is, if I can achieve this result by following this plan, I'll just sort of become the kind of person that I hope to be. We sort of implicitly think, if I had these results, I would be a lot happier. I would be a lot better off. And my argument, my encouragement, is to reverse the process, to start at the core and to say, first, who is the type of person I wish to become? What is the type of identity I want to reinforce? And then, if I want to be that kind of person, what's the process? What are the habits that I need to have to reinforce that identity? And finally, trusting that the outermost layer, the results, the outcomes, will come along the path or along the way of becoming that kind of person. So if you want to reshape your identity, if you're trying to build or foster a new identity, there are really two steps. You want to start with figuring out the type of person you wish to become, and then you come up with small wins or little habits that contribute toward that reinforce this desired identity. So it's very simple. Let's say you want to become a writer. So your identity is, I'm the type of person who writes each day. And then your system is, I sit down at my desk at 9 a.m. and I pull up a blank document and I write 100 words. Let's say you're trying to get in shape. Your identity is, I'm the type of person who doesn't miss workouts. Your system is, I wake up at 7 a.m. each day, put on my workout clothes, walk outside and, walk around the block twice. Let's say we're trying to focus on relationships, and so you want to become the type of person who is always making your partner's life easier, your spouse's life is easier. So you could say something like, identity is I'm the type of person who makes each day a little bit better for my spouse. And then system is I try to find one thing each day that I can take off their plate, something that, I'm thinking ahead for them and they don't have to focus on everything themselves. There are many different forms that this can take, but those are a few different examples of what it might look like to take your ultimate goal, translate it into an identity, and then figure out a habit that reinforces being that kind of person. And so the small habits that you perform each day, they reinforce your desired identity. They cast votes for being that kind of person. And as you show up in these small ways, whether it's sending one email or writing one sentence or meditating for 1 minute, they're small actions in the moment, but they provide evidence of being that kind of person. And the more that you build up this body of evidence, the more you have a reason to believe in that aspect of your story. And this becomes really powerful in the long run because once you start to believe in a story, once you start to have evidence for something, once you start to take pride in that aspect of who you are, man, you have every reason in the world to stick with the habit. Like if you take pride in the size of your biceps, you never skip arm day at the gym. If you take pride in how your hair looks, you have this long, complicated hair care routine, you do it every day. In a sense, the person who feels like, hey, this is just part of who I am, they don't have to motivate themselves to do the habit in the same way that somebody who's just getting started might. By linking your habits to your identity, by thinking about how your habits reinforce your identity, you're actually capturing probably the most powerful thing that habits can do, which is they can help shape the type of person that you wish to become. One of the quintessential bad habits is smoking, and the connection between smoking and identity, it's strong. Let's say you have two people, you walk into a room, and there's a carton of cigarettes on the counter. And the first person takes a look at the cigarettes, and you're like, hey, would you like one? And they're like, oh, no, thanks, I'm trying to quit. And the second person, you say, hey, would you like one? And they say, oh, no, thanks, I'm not a smoker. And they both have done the same thing, right, which is turn down a cigarette. But they've done it in a very different way. Because the first person still identifies as a smoker, and they're trying to stop. The second person no longer identifies that way. Oh, no, thanks, it's not who I am. The difference between those two frames of mind, I think, reveals a lot about what's going on internally for those people. If you can reframe your habits so that it's not part of your identity, it's not that you're trying to quit smoking, you are returning to being a non-smoker, right? Presumably there was some point in your life when you didn't smoke cigarettes, when you were a kid or whatever. You've done it before. How can you return to this identity that you previously had? Smoking is a quintessential example of a bad habit, and it's kind of, very easy to see. But this same methodology, the same line of thinking can apply to almost any habit in life. What is the story that you have about who you are and why it's part of your identity? And can you start to reframe that a little bit? Can you give yourself a different lens to look at the problem through? And if so, you're probably better positioned to release the desire for the habit. There's the story about Magic Johnson that he had this very successful playing career. And after he finished, he wanted to start a business career, wanted to transition. And the transition actually wasn't super smooth for him. It had a little bit of challenge. He had trouble getting funding early on, or trouble getting people to just say, hey, yeah, this is something we'll support you in. He went to the owner of the Lakers and asked, hey, can you teach me more about business? Can you show me more things here? And eventually utilized some of those lessons and funding to get into the business world. And although he made over $100 million during his playing career, he's made much more money from his business career. But even for someone famous and well-established like that, the transition to a new chapter was not seamless. If you can keep that in mind as you transition to your next chapter or your new season, realize that this is a process and that there are lessons that we can take from the previous chapters and apply to the new one. But that doesn't mean it's going to happen overnight, and it doesn't work that way for anyone. So a quick assignment for you as we've talked about identity and habits and how they connect. The core question to ask yourself is, what am I reinforcing? So when you think about your habits, what identity is being served there? What identity is being reinforced? And maybe go a step further and ask yourself, who is the type of person I wish to become? And what habits can I build to reinforce becoming that kind of person? And over the broad span of time, as you cast more votes for being that way, you're going to find yourself believing in it. Coming up, why do we form the habits we do? And how can we change them? Would you believe this cat has the answers?